When it comes to metal roofing in the Rocky Mountain region, there's some considerations you need to have when it comes to ventilation and proper venting of your attic space or creating a cool roofing system. That's what we're talking about in today's Q&A Monday. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Metal Roofing channel. Welcome to Q&A Mondays. All the questions we discussed today are located in the description below. Today, I've got Jeff Hawk from Sheffield Metals and Thain and Jesse from Great Northern Metal Company out of Bozeman, Montana. Thanks, guys, for being here. So we're discussing ventilation today because there's a lot of snow that comes down in the Montana area, freeze thaw applications. So talk to me about why this is even an important conversation at all when it comes to assembly design.
Snow load, right, being the main one, and we do get a lot of snow depending on the winter, but we live in an area where snow loads might be 35 pounds per square foot in town, getting up into the 80, low 100s up in the mountains, where we're seeing a lot of construction happening up in the mountains, kind of the place to live these days, right? So a lot of snow.
A lot of low slopes holding the snow.
A lot of low slopes, a trend towards low slopes in the past 10 or 12 years. And low slope meaning anything below 3, but a lot of 1s, a lot of half 12 pitches, right? So you're going to have snow sitting on your roof, even if it is metal.
So even before we get into the ventilation discussion, we have to address the weight that your home is going to be holding.
And how that snow is going to interact with the metal roof. Is it going to be sitting on there? Are you using snow brakes? Are you trying to keep the snow on there to protect property, landscape, people? And then from there, the question becomes ice dams and what's that? How is that going to affect the roof? And it's usually negative.
Yeah, and everything that the guys have been talking about, is also going to affect your panel profile that you need to select for the job. Your slope, what you're trying to do with the snow, things like that. So, a lot of things are going to have to get taken into consideration when you're looking at all these different experiences that your roof might encounter, throughout its life. You got to look at all of them so you can make sure you pick the proper panel that's going to work in those situations.
So let's say I'm a homeowner in one of these areas. What's my approach? What should I be doing? Who should I be talking to? What's some advice you guys have for homeowners?
Well, I think it starts well before they're choosing a roof panel. I think it starts in the design of the home and at the architect and engineer level.
Talk about cold roof and educating for it. That's where it needs to happen, right? Because a homeowner that moves from out of state, wants a house in the mountains, they're not thinking about how the roof is going to function.
Just because you come up with something on paper or you have an idea of what you want it to look like, doesn't necessarily mean that assembly is going to be applicable for the area that you guys are installing it in. So there might be some design considerations that, require some changes. Like they said, it's really important to look at all that stuff before you get too far down the line, because you might end up spending a lot more money or encountering some serious problems.
Talk to me about the decision between holding snow or letting snow come off the roof, and how that impacts the assembly design of your roofing system.
Well, I think it's an easy decision. If you need to protect people, landscaping, whatever, property, air conditioner, then you need to hold the snow on the roof.
Gutters are another big consideration.
And if you need to hold snow on your roof, then your building system has to be able to support that weight.
And that's usually engineered in the truss package, right? When the lumber companies create the trusses, that's they're determining snow loads for that specific site.
Even if you're not using a snow guard system, you still have to design for the amount of snow that can be held on the roof, whether you're trying to hold it on there or not.
And then there's ground snow load, which is how much snow is on the ground. But then there's the roof design snow load, which I rarely see engineered into a set of plans.
I hardly ever.
Right, but that's the real one that you need to use, because you could have a 50 pounds per square foot ground snow load, but on the northeast side of this, Dormer Valley connection, it's 90 pounds.
Yeah.
What about when it comes to choice of, snow guards? What are some things that you want to consider there?
Well, I think it needs to be done properly. I don't think that a contractor coming in and saying, "Well, give me 50 feet of it." It's like, no. Well, we need more information on that. We need to make sure it's protected. So we're going to want to know how long the eve is, if there's valleys, and give us something other to go on than, hey, just sell me 50 feet of this.
Pitch is a huge one. Roof slope, 112 roof is going to hold snow a lot longer than a 12-12.
And the panel length, right? If you've got a 60-foot 112 panel, you're going to need multiple rows on there. You can't just stick a row at the bottom and cross your fingers.
The other thing that we always promote is, if you're installing standing seam with the hidden fastener system, non-penetrating mounts. That's always really important to us. So let's go from snow loads and snow guards. Let's talk about ventilation real quick. Talk to me about why is that important? Ventilation, ice damming, that whole section.
So as you look at heat transfer from a conditioned living space up through the attic and the roof, that warm, moist air hits that roof sheeting and it starts melting the snow from the backside. That snow melt water drains off the roof like it's designed to do. And then you hit your eave, where that eave, depending on the overhang, could be 2 foot, 1 foot, 4 foot. Underneath that eave is ambient air temperature. In the winter, that could be 20 below. So you have moisture draining off the roof, hitting an ambient air temperature eave, and it freezes. And that happens day in, day out. And that ice dam that ice that forms creeps up the roof. Metal panels aren't meant to hold water. And you could end up getting leaks in the roof.
Yeah, and I'll say something as well as to that, as that ice dam's forming, and that water's backing up, that water can infiltrate the panel seams depending on what type of roof you're looking at. And now it freezes, right?
Yep.
So,
and it expands.
So, it can open up certain type of systems, just from the freeze thaw effect, or, as that snow starts melting, you might have water getting into a system that ends up causing a leak because now water's been able to infiltrate that, backing up the roof. And now as it thaws out, you have an influx of water all melting at the same time. You might make it through the first winter, but once it starts thawing out, you might realize that you have a ton of problems.
And you might go 2 or 3 winters without having an issue at all. You might not know that you have an ice damming issue until you get, one good winter, and then it's a huge issue.
So if I'm a homeowner, how do I prepare for that? What do I need to be looking at? How does ventilation help solve that problem?
Well, again, I think it starts at the architect engineer phase of figuring out if this needs a cold roof system or a cool roof system, or no, it's just a single slope. There's no valleys in it. I think we'll be okay. I think it starts at the architect engineer stage every time.
Can you explain what you mean when you say cold roof system?
Cold roof design. When you talk about ventilation of a roof assembly, I think there's 2 different points you got to touch on. One is attic space ventilation, which it kind of plays into cold roof ventilation, but it's separate. Attic ventilation is you're simply trying to vent moisture from the house that builds up from all sorts of things out of the attic space, so you don't get mold and all that nasty stuff. So for cold roof design, and I'm not like super knowledgeable on this, but you're trying to create a thermal break using ventilation. So in my mind, I've always been taught that a cold roof is basically a roof on top of a roof, right? And it creates a air gap, a dead air space between the main roof assembly and your roofing material. And it allows you to ventilate cold air from down low, pushing that hot air out from the ridge cap or your in-wall vents or whatever the case may be, to create a cold airspace underneath the roofing material that doesn't allow thermal heat escape from the house to melt that snow.
Yeah, or
Heat transfer.
Gotcha. So the air below the roofing system is closer to the temperature above the roofing system.
Correct.
Yep. So you don't get thermal heat transfer melting the snow.
Melt free.
And what if I'm a homeowner and I'm, experiencing these problems on a re-roof? Is there anything I can do to solve these issues at that point?
Absolutely. I think, I'm just now learning that there's some products that can be used to create a thermal break. There's the cold roof design at a re-roof. it's unfortunate that if that's the cause of the re-roof, it's definitely something that you want to look at.
Yeah, there are products out there that have certain thickness of iso board, and then they have a ventilation gap, and then they have a substrate that you would attach your roof to that has helped stop that warm air transfer from inside the building and create that thermal break that we've been talking about. Usually these are going to raise the costs of your roof installation, but
they're usually a lot cheaper than a re-roof after the problem's been identified.
Exactly. So, if you think long term, probably having issues with the roof system that you just got done paying a bunch of money for. And not only that, but then, obviously all the hassle and everything else that you're going to have to go through of replacing a roof system. It's wise if you have the ability to address those concerns up front and take care of them before you have issues than trying to do it after the fact.
So if you're researching a cold roof, what are some considerations you should have?
I think we've talked about, the main idea behind a cold roof is, creating that thermal break between the warm air inside and the ambient temperature outside. Obviously, there's going to be several different ways you can go about doing that, but you need to consider the application of how that cold roof is being installed and what you're going to have to attach your metal roof system to. And if you're looking for a tested system, how that's going to line up with the engineering available for that panel profile. A lot of the systems, especially residential, don't require engineering. There are more systems becoming available and more homeowners that are looking for it. If you have a roof system that's installed over a solid substrate, you want to make sure that those cold roof systems you're installing can match up with that engineering that's available. So you not only have to do your research on what kind of cold roof options you have, but what type of panels are tested that could meet that design if you're looking for a tested system.
Yeah, and panel selection isn't something that we've discussed, but is there anything you guys can tell me about, what things to consider there, if ventilation and cold roofing is a thing that you're looking at?
I think that panel selection is, you need to talk to an expert. Come see us and we'll help educate you on what panel is the best option for your application. And we could run through 30 different scenarios and tell you what application or what panel would work best, but really everyone's different, and come see us and we'll give you the best recommendation, or your local whoever.
A lot of variables in panel selection.
Like they said, depending on slope, roof design, what it is you're trying to accomplish, type of decking, that's all going to play into the panel profile that you're going to choose. Just while we're talking about panel profiles, bringing it up, expansion and contraction. If you're in a cold roof area, you got a panel over 20 feet long, expansion and contraction is going to have to be taken into account. So you want to make sure that the system that you're using is either capable of expanding and contracting on its own, or the accessories, mainly expansion clips, say mechanically sealed systems, can accommodate the thermal movement that you're going to see in those areas.
Jesse, Thain, you want to tell me a little bit about Great Northern Metal Company before we go?
Well,
You're the face man.
we started back in 2019, pride ourselves on being the most educated and the most technical company in our region, and just treating people the way that we want to be treated.
We pride ourselves in having the customer's best interests in mind when they choose, design, metal roofing, metal siding.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you sharing your knowledge here on the Metal Roofing Channel. Jeff, great to have you on, as always. If you have any questions, comment down below. We'd love to answer them for you. Subscribe here to the Metal Roofing Channel. As always, I'm Thad Barnett, and we'll catch you next time.